to historical sites and landmarks recognized by the Historical Commission of the Philippines. So, there are 20 historical places in the Philippines to stroll through history, and these are Aguinaldo Shrine. Located in Kawit, Cavite, the Aguinaldo Shrine was the home of the first and youngest president of the Republic of Philippines, Emilio Aguinaldo. It's a historical place in Philippines because it's where the first Philippine flag was waved that symbolized the country's independence in 1898. Now, it's a famous tourist spot and houses of some of Aguinaldo and his family's memorabilia. What makes this place interesting is that you'll realize how intelligent Aguinaldo was through the architecture of his house, revealing some secrets, hideouts, and passages that were relevant during that time of war. It houses historic of artifacts that are useful for research and educational purposes. The many secrets, passage, and hiding place in the house, also known as Lunita Park, Bagumbayan is one of the most historical attractions in the Philippines and National Historical Shrine in the Philippines. This is because the Philippines' national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal, was executing here in 1896 after the fight for the country's freedom from the Spaniards through his articles, essay, and novels. Highlights: the Rizal Monuments, a great place for strolls and picnics, a colorful dancing fountain. One of the most notable Philippine landmarks and important historical sites in the Philippines is Fort Santiago in Intramuros, Manila. It was the place where Dr. Jose Rizal was held in prison because his execution. Hundreds of lives were lost in these Philippines landmarks during Spanish colonial period and World War II. Today, Fort Santiago is one of the major tourist spots for historical place in Manila and in the Philippines. Highlights: view of scenic ruins called by World War II. A walk in and around Intramuros is likely as stroll through history where you see amazing cultural attractions in the Philippines. That's why when talking about the top 10 historical place in the Philippines and historical place in Manila, Intramuros is never missed the list. It's the oldest and historic core of Manila and built with defensive walls against the foreign invasions, hence and being called the World City. Here you can see the preserved Spanish of colonial structures from government offices to residential areas and souvenir shops. Highlights: lots of preserved Spanish colonial structures surrounded by other historic places like Fort Santiago, Cantor via bamboo, bicycle, calis, or by foot. The Rizal Shrine in Dapitan, Zamboanga del Norte is one of the most historical places in Mindanao. This is where Dr. Jose Rizal spent 4 years of exile when he was accused of planning the revolution against Spanish rule. Rizal Shrine in Zamboanga del Norte is one of the important landmarks in the Philippines. Highlights: the Meritero rock where Rizal watched the sunsets and where he wrote one of his most beautiful poems, Meritero. Also perfect for nature lovers. Located at a crossroads of EDSA Avenue and Ortegas Avenue and in Quezon City. EDSA Shrine, formerly known as the Shrine of Mary, Queen of Peace, is no doubt one of the most historical places in Luzon and among the landmarks in the Philippines that truly made a mark. This is where the historic and world-renowned People Power Revolution took place in 1896 to oust the then dictator Ferdinand Marcos and stop the martial law. The People Power Revolution is one of the world's most historic events because the uprising was a peaceful, bloodless, and successful. You'll see a few notable monuments in the Philippines in near the EDSA Shrine.
So hi everyone, now let's talk about the Leyte Landing Memorial Park. So the Leyte Landing Memorial Park, also known as the MacArthur Leyte Landing Memorial National Park, is one of the most famous monuments in the Philippines. It is a protected area of the Philippines that commemorates the historical arrival of General Douglas MacArthur in Leyte Gulf to free the Philippines from Japanese occupation in October 20, 1944. He also became famous of his line, "I shall return." So, and later on, fulfilled his promise to the Philippines. So, the highlight of this is the statues of General Douglas MacArthur and his troops and the exact location where they landed. So, the Hittite kingdom, those vanished from historical records, much of the territory being seized the Assyria. Alongside this, with this attack, many international issues led to the end of the Hittite kingdom. So, the end of the kingdom was part of the larger Bronze Age collapse. So, now let's talk about the Biak na Bato. So, Biak na Bato is another historical place in Philippines. Is the Biak na Bato in San Miguel, Bulacan. This is the famous landmark in the Philippines where Emilio Aguinaldo and other revolutionaries established the Biak na Bato Republic to free the Spaniards. So the highlights of this is the hanging bridge, the clear river, several caves including the exact place where the revolutionaries secretly established a republic. So, Barasoin Church. So, Barasoin Church is not just an ordinary place for worship, but it also one of the most historical attraction in the Philippines because their significant events in the Philippines history occurred in the church. So, the convening of the first Philippines Congress on September 15, 1898, the ratification of the Malolos Constitution on January 21st, 1898, and the inauguration of the First Philippine Republic on January 23rd, 1899. This is perfect if you're looking for historical places in the Philippines near and Manila. So the highlight of this is the Museo and Republica ng 1899, where you can enjoy several galleries that feature the historic events in town and the country. So, Mactan Shrine. So, Mactan Shrine, explorer Ferdinand Magellan in 1521. The Mactan Shrine is the one of the famous Philippine landmarks and was built in honor of Lapu-Lapu. So the highlight of Mactan Shrine is the 65th feet bronze amusement of Datu Lapu-Lapu. So, Carigidor Island. Carigidor Island is a small, rocky island located at the entrance of the Manila Bay. It was once the headquarters of Allied Filipinos and American forces who fight against the Japanese. So during the World War II, and the witness to the bravery of these soldiers, while the Japanese had occupied lots of places in the Philippines, they avoided corregidors because of the fear of the huge canyon surrounding the places or the place. This is definitely one of the most visited cultural attraction in the Philippines. So the highlight of Corregidor is the beautiful and historic ruins like Middleside Barracks and Butterway. You can also see here Corregidor's longest gun, Battery Hearn. So, now let's talk about the Kale or Kali Chrysologo. The list of famous historical landmarks in the Philippines isn't complete without vegan in it. So, and among of the things that vegan is well known for is the Kale Chrysologo, where you can see cobblestone street, intricate architectures, and horse carriages, or commonly known as Calesa. It's one of the few Hispanic towns surviving in the Philippines and one of the best preserved Spanish colonial town in the world. So the highlight of this is the Cobblestone Street, the preserved Spanish colonial town, many antique shop, and the great food spots. So, Blood Compact Shrine. The Sandugo or Blood Compact Shrine monument in Tagbilaran is the landmark at the site of the first international treaty of friendship between Spaniards and Filipinos. This Bohol tourist spot depicts si Katuna and Legazpi at the famed Sandugo movement. So, the highlight of Blood Compact Shrine is the iconic statue of men performing the traditional Sandugo with ocean view.
So in continuation, so we have here a shrine of valor. also known as the Mount Samat National Shrine. The Shrine of Valor in Bataan is a memorial to all of the soldiers who died bravely in the battle against the Japanese forces and those who died during the Bataan Death March in World War II. Don't miss this place as it's one of the most beautiful Bataan historical places. So the highlights of the place: the shrine consists of a large memorial cross and a colonnade accessible to and from the popular Las Casicas Filipinas de Acusar. So next, Fort San Pedro. Fort San Pedro is the oldest fort in the country and one of the most visited Cebu City tourist spots. Similar to Manila's Fort Santiago, Fort San Pedro served as a military defense structure during the 17th century. Spanish conqueror Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, who founded the earliest settlement in Cebu, had the initiative to put up this. At Fort San Pedro, you'll discover the history of Cebu, the Spanish government, and well-preserved Spanish artifact. About 14 cannons can still be found in what has become a leisure park today. Make sure to visit Fort San Pedro as it's one of the historical places in the Philippines. You'll enjoy exploring. Highlights of the place: there's a museum inside. So let's talk about the next place, Plaza Cuartel Puerto Princesa. So, aside from being one of the world's best islands, Palawan is also home to some famous landmarks in the Philippines like the Plaza Cuartel in Puerto Princesa. Then, it served as a World War II garrison of Filipino and American soldiers, and now the landmark serves as a memorial for prisoners of war who were burned alive in an underground tunnel. So, its highlights: spots where soldiers were suffered and killed. A huge park perfect for a good walk. So, next, historical sites: Binondo, Manila. If you want to go on a food trip while seeing historical places in Manila, go to Binondo. Not only Binondo offers a great food adventure, but it's also home to the oldest Chinatown in the world. From fried siopaw, dim sum, and roast duck to adventurous kits like frog legs, Binondo has just about everything your tummy could ever crave. It's a popular tourist spot because of the amazing food spots in the area and affordable shopping places. Aside from Chinatown, Binondo is also home to the historic Binondo Church built in the late 1600s. It was destroyed during World War II, in which only the facade, including the belfry and the Ongpen Street site, remained standing and was reconstructed after the war. So there is a great food spots. So let's turn to the next historical sites, University of Santo Tomas. The list of all historical buildings in the Philippines is never complete without the University of Santo Tomas in Manila. Founded on April 28, 1611, the University of Santo Tomas is one of the oldest existing universities and holds the oldest extant university charter in the Philippines and in Asia. UST has produced 4 presidents of the Philippines, namely Manuel L. Quezon, Sergio Osmeña, Jose P. Laurel, and Diosdado Macapagal. Produced the 3 Philippine vice presidents and 6 chief justices of the Philippine Supreme Court, and of course, the Philippines' national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal, where he studied of medicine. And its highlights of the place: the Arc of the Centuries, the UST Church. So, next, historical sites, Tirad Pass, Ilocos Sur. Tirad Pass is not just a great spot for adventure seekers, but it's also one of the most historical places in the Philippines, as it was the site of the 1819 Battle of Tirad Pass during the Philippine-American War. And the highlights of the place, amazing mountain views and lush hills. So the last but not the least historical sites of the Philippines, Limasawa Southern in Leyte. So the town of Limasawa in Southern Leyte is one of the historical sites in the Philippines you shouldn't miss. The first documented Catholic Mass in the Philippines was held here on March 31, 1521, officiated by Father Pedro de Valderrama. And its highlights are Magellan's Cross, Dakdak Beach, and Limasawa Island Lagoon. So, I hope you learned. So, that's all about the discussion of the given topic, which is the historical sites and landmarks recognized by the Historical Commission of the Philippines.